Hello again, Brian Lane here, President and CEO for the Center for Health Affairs, as well as Champs Healthcare. Today, we're going to be continuing our discussions from a healthcare leader perspective on the Bright Talk platform. Appreciate everybody joining today. And most importantly, we've got an amazing leader on the horn with us, especially dealing with workforce issues, which each and every single one of us are all dealing with. And so we've got David Barnes with IBM Corporation, who's the Vice President of Global Workforce Policy. So the guy who's controlling the policy regarding IBM's workforce is on the horn with us here. So please, listen up. He's got a lot to share with us. David leads IBM's global agenda in workforce policy and is based within Washington, D.C. He oversees IBM's advocacy on a range of issues, including the future of workforce skills and learning, labor, employment rules, diversity, inclusion, and corporate responsibility. That's the guy. He engages on AI and the future of work with government leaders around the world and in multilateral fora such as the G7, EU, and at the OECD, where he's the vice chair of the Business OECD Employment, Labor, and Social Affairs Committee. That's a mouthful. David's global leadership experience includes executive roles for IBM in Australia, China, Italy, Japan, and US. David was previously the vice president of governmental programs at IBM, Asia Pacific headquarters in Tokyo, and is responsible for advancing IBM's public policy priorities across the region. He's led a variety of different councils and endeavors. He currently speaks at multilateral institution venues and at organizations such as Chatham House and the Brookings Institute and at the World Bank. He briefs IBM clients on key policy agendas and also guest lectures at academic institutions such as the American University, the National Defense University, and the University of Milan. Today, we are blessed to have this leader with us. I've got a whole host of questions for you, David, so get ready. And I have you talk your mouth off today to the audience on a global level. We reach, just so you know, approximately like 10 million people plus on this platform. So get ready.
That's the biggest audience I've ever done.
So first off, David, you're the vice president of global workforce policy at IBM. Can you please tell us a bit about your role and how your expertise influences the way IBM is navigating the current challenging culture of modern workforce?
Well, thanks, Brian, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to that wonderful audience that you reach. That's truly impressive, and reflects on your organization, I'm sure, and the value you create. But look, as you said in your generous intro, I talk to governments around the world about these key workforce issues and try and help provide advice that shapes the environment for big employers like us in these various countries. Because, as a technology company, we've got headlights into what's coming with the technology and how that's going to affect employment and how people work and where they work. And we want to ensure that governments are prepared for that and are creating an environment where we as an employer and your members and your affiliates can invest and employ people and serve clients and create value.
That's great. That's great. The where we work is top of mind for so many here within Cleveland and also globally. Many organizations have had to react to changes caused by COVID, from a pandemic perspective to rapid digitization of business. Can you describe ways in which IBM has reacted or even responded proactively to those recent changes?
Well, like everyone, COVID, was a real stress test for us, and I'm sure you know, the organizations that you deal with more than anyone in healthcare. But we were pretty lucky. IBM has had work from home in various configurations since the end of the 1980s, believe it or not, which seems like forever ago, and I'm dating myself here. and so we had a pretty flexible workforce, and it's professional and white collar for the most part. So we had some advantages there, but the first thing we had to do was obviously get everyone home, and 95% of our people went home, worked from home, and we had the infrastructure to support that already in place. We had 5% who were essential workers and who were running around places like hospitals and banks and airlines and governments, keeping their systems going during this crisis. But, you know, to support all that, we really had to provide training for our managers in terms of learning how to deal with a remote workforce. We beefed up our employee assistance program to deal with mental health issues. You know, we were doing things like securing masks for our essential workers. But importantly, we took the opportunity to be more intentional about our business processes and how we designed them and how they were done, because this question of where the work was being done led us to go back and look at, well, you know, what should we be doing, and more importantly, how should we be doing it? And let's take the where out of the equation, at least initially, and then once we figure out how things are best done, then we can bring that question of place back into it, because, you know, we found that we could do a lot of things, you know, not necessarily from our workplaces. We also ended up shedding a lot of underutilized and unutilized real estate. We started investing in new hubs, which were reconfigured for people to collaborate together and innovate, and less kind of individual places to work together. We never thought about going to 100% work from home, you know, as we return almost post-COVID. What we realized was presence is critical for culture and for learning, because we saw the attrition in those over time with 100% work from home. So we really want people to be in at least a hybrid work model, but the dependency was all about what is the job that needs to be done and how best to do it. So if we really need you in here 5 days, we need you in here 5 days. But if you can, you know, 2 or 3, and that works for the process and for the clients, great.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like you really took stock of your employees' needs and wants, and as well as your clients' needs, and created proper kind of meeting of expectations, is what I just heard, and maybe even exceeded the levels of satisfaction on both ends through that shift in that movement.
Well, that was certainly the intent, that meeting expectations for employees and obviously for our clients, but the employees were, you know, critical to keep going through this protracted period of great stress, them and their families, and providing the supportive context for that was paramount to us during that period.
You know, one of the things that's popping up in my head right now is I'm very curious about your advocacy regarding skills and learning within the healthcare setting. You know, many people are trying to diversify their educational base, their degrees, in order to meet greater demands and needs. But as AI and the digitization of business is changing those skills required to perform a job, how are you and IBM investing in its workforce to keep them trained and as well as competitively skilled?
Yeah, that's a huge question, Brian. Skills are at the center of our people strategy, essentially. And when we took the decision to adopt that philosophy, we did a couple of things. One is we told our employees that skills are necessary, that reskilling is essential, and you can't stop learning. But we had to deliver something to enable that for them. And what we did was created an online learning platform within our corporation, which has literally tens of thousands of courses on it. And basically, it provides like a Netflix-like interface. In other words, it pushes recommendations to you that are personalized for you in your job and your career path and your interests.
Wow. Okay.
So it's driven by artificial intelligence. And so, it has some predictive capabilities and some inference capabilities, and you don't have to follow its recommendations. You can choose your own learning and your own path, or you can listen to its recommendations or what your manager or supervisor tells you. But what we also did was create the expectation that each of our employees would do a minimum of 40 hours each year of learning.
Oh, wow.
And what, interestingly, we've been pleasantly surprised that since we adopted that, each year the number's gone up in terms of actual achievement from 40 to 60, and now is touching 90 hours per employee in IBM on average. The other thing we did to underpin the importance for that was we made it an important part of compensation. In other words, learning affected how you were paid. And each year when we go through salary reviews, our supervisors and our managers look at three aspects. One is your individual performance. Mm-hmm. 2 is your skills acquisition during the year. And 3 is what the market's saying about your job and its compensation. So employees have a real financial stake in terms of acquiring new skills and not falling behind.
That's wild. It's really interesting also to hear the personalization and then the hours that were required at 40, then going and jumping to people taking it upon themselves to even learn more to the 90. Immediately what's in my brain is certifications as well as additional degrees that are probably happening across your organization because the people are skilling up, and then they're being able to meet greater client demands and do other things that they probably didn't originally intend on doing, but have learned through that AI platform or been served up, let's say, the correct education to put them down those career paths or elevate them.
You're exactly right. I mean, part of the process is earning a digital badge for your achievement. And the badge records what you've done and what you've achieved and what you've learned. And that's obviously portable, that badge. You can take that, with your digital record on LinkedIn or wherever. But interestingly, in terms of the acquisition of or attainment of these badges by our employees, it's the over 40-year-olds who, by ratio, have been earning the most badges out of any age cohort in the company. So it's the more senior people who have really taken to this with more enthusiasm, if you will.
Why do you think that's the case, out of curiosity?
I think because of the arc of their careers, they've seen the change and they know that they've got to keep up and they got to keep going or, keep up with the change.
And so you're stating that that's a new trait of learning versus maybe a younger group of employees who are already habitually doing that within the market, have been trained from a collegiate or from even high school to do that type of upskilling type of process. Is that?
Yeah, that's a fair thing to say, and we've also found that technical skills only have a kind of half-life of, it's about 18 months now.
Oh wow!
So if you've got a technical qualification in our industry, it's not lasting you very long anymore.
Interesting. So here's a question. I mean, we're talking about policy. We're talking about upskilling, and education. How should we, just overall organizations, not just healthcare, not just hospitals, but just organizations as a whole, be preparing the workforce of tomorrow? I know that's a really big question, but you might have some extremely salient points. You've already given some. I didn't know if there's additional ones here.
Well, look, I think I've talked about our own workforce and the need to invest in our own training that's relevant to the job. The other thing we do is look at, well, what's the outside world doing to help provide the labor pool that we need? And when we looked at what's going on in the US in terms of federal funding for education, for post-secondary, or for secondary education, post-secondary education, higher education, we found out that there's about $132 billion federal dollars a year allocated to that, which is a lot of money, right?
It is.
And 2/3 of that actually goes to supporting the attainment of college degrees. So 2/3 of $132 billion. But what we also know is that only 1/3, roughly, of Americans have a college degree. So, the other 2/3 out there are getting a kind of a smaller slice of the pie in terms of federal support for, learning and training and reskilling. So if we're going to create more opportunities and create a bigger pool of labor for us as employers to draw from, we got to think about how we skill up that other 2/3 to a level of proficiency that is, useful for the people we hire. So we're working hard to push for more funding to go into alternative pathways to college degrees, not downplaying the value of those, but just saying, look, there are other things you can do to help people into good paying jobs, like, apprenticeships, internships, all kinds of, short-term training, going back to college for, short courses and so on, retraining, that ought to be better supported because of the rapid change in today's business and technological environment. And also we need a greater focus on soft skills or transversal skills, leadership, communications, those kinds of things, because look, we see those as the best long-term guarantees of success in employment. And as I said, the technical skills, the half-life, very short. And you can always retrain people in those. You can always, reskill. But getting those foundational soft skills in place is absolutely vital for anyone's success in employment, is our view.
That's great. Yeah, I get the taste of stackable education and learning, where a person can take a certificate and then transfer it into a degree, but also with a basis of experience, skills, within the collegiate system. I think we're starting to see more of that happen within the overall marketplace.
Indeed, absolutely.
Considering the range of issues that you are advocating on, what issues today do you believe are the most pressing and need to be addressed immediately?
Oh, look, I won't move away from skills, Brian. I mean, look, we've got an incredible labor shortage right now. We've got a shortfall of the people with the skills that we all need, and we've got rapid change, digital transformation going on at the same time. And look, we've got all these millions of open jobs.
Right.
So what's going on there? Well, we don't believe we've got people to fill them, and we've got whole sectors of American society who ought to have greater opportunity, and we can invest in those. And so that's why we invested in skills first hiring, which is really all about putting skills and competencies and the ability to learn and curiosity ahead of the 4-year college degree. We used to require basically 99% of our recruits to have a college degree, but pre-COVID, and like a lot of the healthcare sector, we started suffering shortages. And so we thought we need to expand our labor pool, and that means we've got to we've got to go revisit what we expect of the people we hire, and to see if we can match that better with the work that needs to be done. So we went back to all our jobs in IBM, and right now we've redefined over 50% of them to no longer require a college degree.
Wow. Wait a second.
Which is a big deal.
You're saying that you're taking out the college degree from your job descriptions and the job postings?
Yes.
To come into your organization.
For over half our jobs, yeah. And we started that 2 years ago, and now about 15% of our hires in the US no longer have a college degree.
That's unbelievable. What a turn.
It is. It's a big shift.
What's the outcomes or the results associated with that? Is that one, are you getting a huge uptick in interest in employees that typically would look at IBM, as the organization that, I can aspire to, but I've got to have multiple levels of degrees, even like a graduate degree to even be considered?
Yeah, and look, in some of our research jobs, our scientists, they obviously have multiple degrees, right?
Sure.
But yeah, what we've done is expanded our labor pool, and the outcomes have been increased retention with these folks, just as good job performance, incredible loyalty, because they really appreciate that they have an opportunity that they may not have had in the past, because they're getting the same money as someone coming in with a college degree doing the same job. It's not that, we pay them less.
Right.
These people are doing the same work. It's because they have the skills and the competencies. We've also increased the diversity of our hires, which is, an important metric for us. So the results for us have been fabulous. We're really pleased with it, and we're going to continue down this path.
Are there studies that people can actually look at, or you can point them to as potential follow-ups from this type of discussion around that?
Well, no academic data yet, because like I said, this is only a couple of years old for us. But what I will tell you is that we are working with groups like the Business Roundtable, the group of CEOs of the blue chip companies in the US, and we've got a whole bunch of them working on a project where they're learning about how to adopt skills first hiring, how to implement it, how to measure it, because our problem is not unique, right? I mean, people want to fix those gaps in their labor force. They want to increase diversity. They want to increase retention.
Yeah, no, honestly, I'm blown away at that change, and very excited to see the outcomes and the results, and it makes total sense in doing it, and especially within the market, and truthfully, it's like COVID kind of helped that in a sense, give it a little bit more oomph in the sense of wanting to have virtual staff and a workforce that can become part of IBM. And so, like I said, stackable education, practical experience, it all needs to be applied. And I love hearing that we're moving away from just a piece of paper, so that makes sense to me.
And look, it was, sorry to just interrupt you there. It was also a matter of not only that redefinition of jobs, but also thinking about those pathways into IBM. How does someone get on, join one of those pathways? And one of the things we did was to create a new pathway by creating first-of-a-kind apprenticeships for technology jobs. There previously were not any apprenticeships for the kind of jobs we offer. So we created 24, 25 of them.
Hmm.
And now we have about 500 apprentices on board.
Wow.
And, you know, they are in things like cybersecurity and software engineering, things like that. But the apprentices that do those can now earn up to 48 college credits for those courses. So they're part of the way to a college degree. And so if they want to continue their studies, they've got those credits up their sleeve.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And then by being a part of that apprenticeship and learning the skills, being in a didactic environment with other leaders, they're not only learning, they're getting the attributes of the actual experience all in one fell swoop, plus the education.
Right. It's earn while you learn without the college debt.
That is fantastic. You know,
which is a big deal these days.
Praise you for that. I mean, both of us, I guarantee we're paying back for a long time.
Yeah,
so there's this wonderful term out there around, you know, the Great Resignation. I know that in our dialogue, you have a different interpretation, and I want the world to hear your interpretation, because it's enlightening, and on top of it, it gives a little bit, I think, more motivation and spark to what's really going on out there versus kind of the doom and gloom associated with, you know, the terminology of resignation.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Use that Chinese live in interesting times. The Great Resignation. It's painful for employers, obviously, and that's been the headline of COVID. But we decided to reframe it as the Great Reevaluation, because okay, the resignation is one product of this, but people aren't simply quitting, right? I mean, they're rethinking how they spend the time in their lives, you know, what the kind of work they're doing, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, and what they're seeking from their jobs and careers, and what's their purpose, what are they doing with their lives. I mean, we think it's more fundamental than just, oh, you know, you can take this job and, you know, put it where you feel like it. I'm leaving. It's more about a deeper set of thoughts than that for a lot of people. And so we're looking at it as a great time to try and recruit our employees. In other words, to establish a tighter sense of engagement or linkage with them. Because if you think about employment, I mean, it used to be all about terms and conditions and compensation, and then employees started worrying about careers and skills, but now it's more about how we as employers act, and, you know, what it feels like for an employee to turn up at work every day, you know, and whether that's turning up at home or at the office. I mean, how does it make them feel? Are they proud of it? Do they get a sense of value from working for who gives them their paycheck? So we see a lot of it more so that employees are seeking things, you know, characteristics like transparency, like you said earlier, flexibility. They want their employer to be more empathetic about, you know, the challenges that they've got going on at home or in the rest of their lives. And that, you know, came into really stark contrast during COVID, the lockdowns, obviously. I mean, people really suffered. So they saw the ability of good employers to be more empathetic, to be more flexible, and to figure things out with them, to sit alongside them. And now they want that going forward. And they also want employers to be true to their values and, you know, to do what they say they're going to do. So you talked about expectations earlier, Brian, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah, no, I feel like it is one of these moments where you're having to take note of where you are within life, what is important, what isn't, how are you impacting society? You know, is this part of the plan? What is the long-term, you know, play? And, you know, in all the conversations, people, you know, are knocking on wood and appreciating their luck and the mortality. But at the same token, they're having to say to themselves, you know, am I doing meaningful work? And does this meet my personal expectations at this given time or my family's expectations? And I feel like what you're stating and putting that into a different perspective gives it even a higher lift, which is it's okay to reevaluate. You should, right? Because your personal accountability falls into your department, into the organization, and then into the overall community. And I like that way of thinking because it frames the importance of what you do and how it impacts others.
Yeah, and I think that's been illustrated in many sectors of the economy, Brian. I mean, we've all seen it in, I guess, hospitality, you know, food and beverage. I mean, the incredible number of employees in that sector just no longer want to do wait staff or bar staff or, you know, those hotel worker kind of jobs because, you know, that doesn't, they realize that's, you know, their purpose is more than that for whatever reason or different to that.
Right. You know, what are you doing, David, regarding the managers within your organization? You know, it just clicked on me here around like listening, empathy, EQ, you know, human dialogues, you know, the ability of having a listening / exchange and showing true caring, because without that, per what we just stated, it's going to be real tough to make the connection and then get things done or even feel that you're being heard and want to be a part of that organization.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. And it was clear during COVID that was a set of behaviors, a set of leadership characteristics that really were essential to keep your employees on board, productive, feeling okay about things. And, you know, we had to provide, you know, quite a bit of guidance to managers during that period. I mean, obviously some of it figured it out for themselves. Some of it found pretty challenging to do that. But the mere fact that you were going by video into people's living rooms, their bedrooms, sometimes their kitchens, and you know, their kids were climbing all over them, or their cat was on their shoulder or something. I mean, it brought home the humanity of all of this a lot more. And I think, you know, everyone started opening up a little bit and saying, well, you know, this is the human side of me. And that spirit of empathy, as you say, came out a lot more. But the other dimension of that too was actually also the dimension of candor and more regular feedback in terms of, you know, course correction, encouragement, whatever it needs to be. Because again, that the experience of COVID just caused people to have to be more candid about what was going on, and it also reinforced the behavior or the ability of managers and supervisors to be more candid about professional things too. And I think, you know, that was for the good as well.
That's great. No, I love that component of it. I'm curious because you touch so many different countries in your global role. You know, how are other countries dealing with all these changes? Are they faster than the U.S., you know, in moving the needle on adoption and change?
You know, the U.S. is doing pretty well globally, in my view. You know, this is a combination of a number of things. I think you look at things like the institutional and social and legal frameworks in each country all affect what you can do and when you can do it and how quickly you can do it. The set of rules around COVID responses, you know, helped shape things for good or for worse in many places, right? And continuing to do so in places like China, for example. They still got these lockdowns going on. But one of the things we found was the existence of a strong corporate culture meant that no matter where you did business, you had this sense of consistency and continuity and expectations that people could rely on, that this is the way things could be done, would be done, within the bounds obviously created by the law and what the governments were saying we could do at the time, though. But that's where we found that culture really mattered in terms of our ability to get the business going, at a speed and recovery pace that we wanted to.
Are you seeing, with all of these changes throughout the countries, more transparency regarding digitization, especially through your operations at IBM?
Yeah, we are, and it's transparency in a number of ways. Transparency in leadership, in terms of more open communications, more channels for feedback, more ability to get pressing questions answered. Obviously, some of those things sometimes create difficult conversations in some places when you have big issues going on outside the four walls of the company or the employer. But employees want to be able to see what their leadership is doing, and why they're doing it, and they want to see the reasons behind things. And frankly, I think in our society there is a much greater expectation about transparency and knowing what's going on, and that's coming inside the employer. And digitization both creates the opportunity for more transparency and at the same time creates more complexity and therefore more concerns about, I want to find out what's going on and why. And particularly with things like artificial intelligence, right? I mean, that's like a black box. And so we've created these 5 pillars of trustworthy AI that we talk about, which includes things like transparency, explainability, and fairness. But when we create a new system, we also involve our employees in new systems which we're going to use internally. And we call it co-creation. And in other words, we get employees involved from the get-go, from the ground up, from design, development, implementation, and improvement. That AI learning platform that I talked about, Netflix-like platform, we had literally thousands of our employees involved in that, in its design and development and deployment. So they know how it works. They can see what's going on inside it. They know why they're getting the recommendations they are, and they're bought into it. And interestingly, we did the same thing with our performance management system. The things that governs how employees are evaluated. They helped design it, and they helped improve it a couple of years later. So they were central to that process. So transparency is critical. We disclose when we're using AI, for example. We tell them, we explain the results that are being given, so employees understand how this thing's working and what data it works from. Again, going back to expectations, Brian, we kind of take the societal assumptions and the societal trends, and you got to bring them in because that's what the employees are expecting.
Yeah, literally, it becomes the baseline of what you're going to build upon, either now or for the future, is what I've garnered from this whole conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly on point.
I'm gonna take this a little bit personal regarding healthcare for a couple of questions with you, primarily because we're the hospital association within Cleveland, and I've been around, for what is it, going on 118 years. Imagine that. Wow. But with that,
hey, you're 7 years older than IBM. I think we're 111 years old.
Oh, really? Hey, all right. I just wish we had the stock.
Yeah.
But the healthcare systems here and just nationally are all having to adapt to digitization of their businesses.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for the different healthcare providers and the administrators out there to invest in their current workforce that might equip them for this ever-changing digitization of business? Now, I believe that you hit upon two elements just in what you've done regarding IBM, but how is that applicable to healthcare?
Well, again, going back to the putting skills at the center, that necessary investment in own skills, the sources of your skills, and what's the policy framework. So that's the kind of the external and internal considerations around skills. But in terms of digitization specifically, I think that we've got to remember that digitization is not automation of a bad process, of a existing process which may not be optimal. I mean, it's about using data in the cloud and AI to drive new value for the business and for your clients. And to realize those outcomes, you have to have the skills at the center of your strategy so your employees can deliver on that. But almost more importantly is that they can be part of initiating change, driving change, designing the change, and implementing it. And so we used that co-creation model that I talked about. And we also used a couple of techniques like design thinking, like, putting the client at the center of the process, and a process from software development, actually, which is called agile development. And those kinds of processes get you to what we call in the tech sector a minimum viable product. In other words, something that will work and do the job. And you get to there really quickly, which you have to do these days. You can't spend 5 years developing a new system. I mean, you've got to get it done in months or weeks, not years. And once you got that minimum viable system, you keep iterating and improving it, in small bites, each more quickly. So, getting your employees positioned for change and knowing how to implement and lead change to the processes that they own is critical. And we trained all our employees on those specific models that I just mentioned, agile development and design thinking. So basically everyone in IBM knows how to do that stuff and use those models of change. So teaching change is quite relevant too. And the other overlooked part of the digitization is design. And why is that important? Well, because employees in commercial organizations are often used to dealing with internal systems which ain't that friendly and they're not that pretty. Mm-hmm. But outside the employer, they're used to dealing with very slick online systems or apps on their iPhone, which just work really easily and really well most of the time. And so we call that a consumer-grade experience. And so we invest in design to make sure we deliver for our employees as close as we can to a consumer-grade experience when they're using our in-house systems. Because that's all part of what it feels like to turn up at work. Are they giving me crappy tools to work with?
Yeah. Or
are they giving me something that's a pleasure to deal with and takes the hassle out of doing my job?
Right. Well, that makes sense. I mean, we have that within the hospital healthcare marketplace, with the requirements of electronic medical record systems and reporting. And so you're always looking to move the care continuum and pathways forward, with the highest quality of care. But there's a lot of administrative work that goes into that. Which could be a burden and it could sometimes even be a barrier. We currently have within the hospital marketplace a a big shift in our workforce right now, and it's like literally a crisis within nursing. A lot of the traveling nursing agencies have become attractive alternatives to full-time hospital employment, which leaves a lot of the hospitals short-staffed of the full-time employees, and then they're having to go outside to obtain that staffing mix, from staffing organizations, which are actually charging at a higher rate or premium, and it's tough on them. They're seeing for the last couple of years kind of a growing trend, which is my staff is going across the street or elsewhere, and now I've got to pay more. So margins are shrinking and going down, down, down. What would be your advice to the hospital systems, from an adaptive perspective, to remain competitive, within the marketplace, for such a currently in-demand workforce? And have you ever seen anything like that within IBM and tech?
Well, we've certainly experienced the shortages, but look, I wouldn't, and the skills gaps, but I'm not going to pretend to tell a healthcare industry expert, how to manage their workforce, because obviously you all are much more intimately familiar with the dynamics of that market. But look, and I see this is a worldwide problem. I mean, I just saw the other day the NHS in the UK is tens of thousands of people out of whack in terms of their demand. But and there are some specifics about your sector, which are regulated credentials and all certifications and so on. But I guess in looking back at our own experience is revisiting the pathways to get to those jobs. How do people get on that conveyor belt or that pathway which takes them to that credential? And are there things we can do that can expand the number of alternative routes they can take to get there? Is one thing. We did that with apprenticeships. We did it by rethinking the qualifications of jobs, and I know you can't always do that for many important jobs in the healthcare sector.
Right.
But with things like, apprenticeship programs, you can take people who might be part of the way there and give them a leg up for the final stage. And so then they've got a loyalty factor to you and to your way of doing things and to you as an employer, because they've had that learning experience, right? And that's what we're finding with the apprenticeship. So, is there a different kind of structured way to take people into that job, which not only takes them into the job where you might lose them again, but creates the loyalty factor, right? So that's one thing. The other thing, obviously, was we worked with the colleges and governments on what they're doing to produce these people, to fund the courses and design the courses and so on. That's kind of pretty basic work. But more fundamentally, there's this question of what are the barriers or disincentives for employees to stay? I mean, I talked about this new interest in employers' values and what they stand for. And what do these jobs mean for managing people's lives outside the workplace? Does it make it impossible? Does it make it too hard in the job model or contract structure that is currently in place? I mean, how do you design in some kind of flexibility that's needed by changing the structure of the job, which might attract more people to either return to the profession or to stay in the profession or stay with you as an employer? So what's the value proposition of the nature of the relationship you're offering as the bottom line? What's the value proposition to the employee? And clearly those nurses are seeing a different value proposition, and they've got reasons for that. And how are we addressing those reasons? Because that's not going to change unless those reasons change. I mean, the outcome is not going to change.
Yeah, that's powerful.
So you know, I mean, and changing those kinds of parameters in the design of the job could well create costs, but it also might drive down some costs that you're currently experiencing in recruitment, hiring, you know, retention, losses of people you've trained, all those kinds of things. And might give you the opportunity to reduce turnover and breed more loyalty. So, you know, I think it's going down to those needs of the people who are doing these jobs, and does what you're offering fit that?
Right. Or fit the evolved structure of what's come out of the pandemic and what
exactly. Yeah, because people people have reevaluated.
Yeah, I agree with your thinking there, and I think that there's some studies that are being shared right now within the different healthcare administrator network, really focusing on that retention aspect, but also reinventing kind of the pathway of how you're going to treat patients inside the acute setting as well as now outside because of the change in the payment structure, which is value-based care versus fee-based. So
right,
lots of little platonics, happening within the market right now. So it's a constant, kind of listen to individuals like yourself in one market and apply those lessons to another. And I'm very appreciative for that insight.
The other thing we do, Brian, and I'm sure your folks do it too, is listen to what people are saying when they're walking out the door. And, we build good retention data. And, we keep a lot of data on that because it helps us figure out a way to drive down regretted losses, regretted attrition, right? So, we've developed an AI system which we use internally for predicting attrition of people in key jobs. And we've got pretty good at identifying someone who's going to leave and who might be, incented to stay in some manner. We're kind of batting about 85% at the moment. So that's, there's things you can do with data. And so that's another area to think about, is build data on why people are leaving and when they leave and catalyst, what are the factors around that.
I mean, I think this whole conversation is showing the importance of data collection and being able to extract it, utilize it, forecast, make the modifications within the organization, draw from it for new solutions, new processes. I mean, you've hit upon that numerous times, and right. I think it's tremendous advice. Besides the focus in on changing your process and moving to that skill-based hiring, are there other changes you see within like the global workforce over the course of the next 5 years that individuals, administrators, leaders should be looking for?
Hey, if you can look out over 5 years, you got a better crystal ball than I have, Brian.
Why did I tap you? Because you're in touch with everybody throughout the world.
I'll say this: everything, the cycle time has really speeded up, and we noted a lot of people, business leaders, talked about during COVID that what we're expecting to happen over 5 or 6 years happened in 12 months. So it. And I think that rate of change is not really slackening off very much.
No, it's intensifying.
we're all getting tired. But so what we might be thinking about 5 years is really we ought to be looking at a 2-year time horizon. And my view is to go back to some of those things we talked about around expectations, the expectations of our stakeholders. And who are they? I mean, they're consumers, they're governments, they're employees, and they're shifting quickly. They're changing quickly. We talked about the change expectations and assumptions of our employees as they, in the great reevaluation. You know, governments are, God knows in your sector, are all over you in terms of pricing and, you know, delivery and all those kinds of things. And so too, they are, you know, those trend lines are going to be accelerating in terms of what legislators and regulators are you know, going to be demanding from our various companies and sectors, and of course, you know, the consumer. But so I think really zooming in on expectations is the big thing to meet the challenge of the next few years. And when you thought about those expectations, how are you positioned and how are your people skilled to deal with that? The other dimension is resiliency. Different world, supply lines, supply chains, and personal resiliency. You know, mental health, all of our people, all those kinds of things. So resiliency and expectations are the two things that I would be focused in on in terms of strategic view.
I always end these, before I thank you on your participation today, with a limited moment, which is, if you had a magic wand, David, what would you change within the workforce, you know, today? And it could be global, it could be local, you know, but what would it be? What would you just immediately make that modification, you know, with your wish?
I wish someone would give me that wand.
I love it.
But look, I think with that magic wand, you know,
yeah,
Brian, I'd like to give America a national mental health break. Seriously. I mean, we could all use just a bit of downtime from what we've been through over the last few years, and I'll make it a two-part wish. Seen on be greedy, and the second thing is to remove the craziness and the extremes from our politics and get sport back on the front pages where it belongs.
There you go.
That's, you know, that's it. I
love it, and that's great wishes, and I hope they come true. I mean, I want to thank you. I mean, you're a true gem of a human being, an amazing leader, and your insights are aspiring and motivational. And I feel like we should do this repetitively. And I may just, you know, pull on your arm to make that happen. I want to say thank you to IBM. I want to say thank you to the audience within Bright Talk. And wish you all the best, and to stay healthy and strong. You know, replay this, folks, because there's a lot here that David has provided us, and we need to take it in and do some self-reflection as well as reflection on our businesses with this sound advice. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks for the opportunity to spend time with you and your terrific audience. I really appreciated it. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.